All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the final part of the show, we are just going to take a early look at our upcoming Super Bowl matchup between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles. And when we got to Championship Sunday, I mean, the writing was on the wall, in my opinion. I knew that this was going to be the matchup we were going to get. Because I just thought it was going to be a tall task for the Commanders to knock off the Eagles. Now I thought that game was going to be closer, but it ended up being a blowout. And it's just the Bills and their track record against the Chiefs. They had to really show me that they could do it and knock them off, and they almost did, like they have in the past. But it's just once again they came up a little bit short, and we will see the same Super Bowl that we got from a couple of years ago. Now that game was very good too. That was a 38-35 game. But I don't know. I feel like I'm more juiced up for this matchup this time around than I was the previous one because Saquon Barkley. I mean, you now add him to the Eagles. Now I know this is coming from a Giant fan, but still, like you got Saquon Barkley now coming out of the backfield, and I think one of the biggest keys to this game is the Chiefs' defensive line going up against the Eagles' offensive line. How is that matchup going to go? Because the Eagles are one of the best rushing teams in the NFL, if not the best rushing team. You know what? They are the best rushing team in the NFL with Saquon. And can the Chiefs and Steve Spagnuolo, with their experience in these big games, how are they going to be able to, at least contain Saquon? How is that going to go? And the other thing, too, is you go back to a couple years ago, Patrick Mahomes was banged up in that Super Bowl because he suffered that high ankle sprain, the few weeks prior against Jacksonville. So he was still a little banged up. He re-aggravated it during the game, but, he was still able to finish it. He had that big scramble that, set up the go-ahead field goal. Well, also there was a flag at the end, which, didn't want to mention that, but had to. Because there was that holding on Juju Smith-Schuster. James Bradberry held him. And, that led to a first down, and Butker kicks a field goal. There would have been more time on the clock had that not have happened, but it did. And that made it 38-35. And like I said, the Eagles didn't have enough time to go down the field and respond. So that's how that game ended. But Jalen Hurts played really well in that Super Bowl. I think the only turnover in the game, because Hurts fumbled, and Nick Bolton returned that for a touchdown. I think that was that was the only turnover in the game. Mahomes didn't throw for a ton of yards in that game either. He only had 3 touchdowns. He had 3 touchdowns, but yeah, he only had what did he have, 170 something yards passing in that game? But he did have 3 touchdowns. He had 1 to Kadarius Toney, 1 to Sky Moore, and then he had 1 to Travis Kelce on their first drive of the game. Kadarius Toney. Yeah, remember him? Yeah, he had that punt return. That was a big play in the Super Bowl, and then he had the touchdown on the same drive. And then Sky Moore had a touchdown as well, like I said. Pacheco had a touchdown as well. I remember that. And the Chiefs were down in that game. I remember, the Eagles were up, and, Mahomes got hurt again, and you thought, this is not looking good for the Chiefs. But they got the stops on defense when they needed to, and they got themselves back in the game, and they ultimately won it. But it was a very good game. The Eagles, like I said, Jalen Hurts played well. Had that big touchdown to A.J. Brown, that deep pass. That was a very entertaining game. And this game, I think, is going to be entertaining. Now, does America want to see this game? No, because not a lot of people like Philadelphia, and, people are tired of the Chiefs. So I get it. I do, but I still think this is going to be a really good game. I'm excited for it because I think it's going to be a good game. I'm just here for a good game. Now, would I have liked to have seen something different? Yes, but look, I'm going to be watching it. I'm going to be locked in, and we could be in for a classic because I do think this Eagles team, as is presently constructed, and as Parker Todd said earlier, you don't have to convince me. This Eagles team is really good. And I watched some of the post game show of I think it was the whole post game of it was the Eagles, the Philadelphia NBC, and Ron Jaworski is part of that panel, and even they said it. If they went up against the Lions, they would have beat them, and I agree. I think if the Lions got past the Commanders, I think the Eagles go into Detroit and they win that game. I mean, Jared Goff would have turned the ball over. Eagles defense would have got stops when they needed to. The Eagles offense, how the Lions defense was towards the end of the year, they would have been able to move the ball against that defense. I mean, we'll never know. I mean, we'll see what happens next year when they play against each other. Now, when they're healthy and the Lions get Aiden Hutchinson back, but I think the Eagles would have went into Detroit and they would have beat them. Now, I probably still would have picked Detroit because I had them in the Super Bowl, but I would have been going with my heart instead of with my head because I would have taken the Eagles. And you imagine if the Eagles didn't lose to the Commanders, or if they weren't somewhat struggling early on offensively in the year. They could have got the number 1 seed. And then, everything would have ran through Philadelphia. I mean, it still did anyways. Didn't have to. And they were also talking about it on the show that I was watching. I mean, they didn't really have to travel. They didn't have to go on a plane. They ended off the year to go to the Super Bowl, 5 straight home games. Because you had the home game. You had the home game against the Cowboys, you had the home game against the Giants, and then you had the 3 straight home games in the playoffs. I mean, that's good for a team. You don't have to travel. Sometimes traveling does take a lot out of you. They didn't really have to do that. Now they're going to have to do that to go to New Orleans, but, that's everybody's got to do that. They're fine. Yeah, and then on the other side, with the Chiefs, I mean, this is just another game, game to add to the legacy of Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid coaching against his former team once again in this spot. There's no Jason Kelce, so we are not getting a Kelce Bowl again. It's only Travis this time around. But you know what? That offensive line for the Eagles did not skip a beat. And that was something, I was maybe somewhat concerned about going into the years. They did lose. The Eagles lost Fletcher Cox and Jason Kelce. They both retired, but you know what? Young guys stepped up. Cam Jurgens, I believe he didn't start the game for the Eagles, but he had to come in due to injury. So he was playing hurt, and again, didn't matter. What a replacement he was for this to this Eagles offensive line. Has not skipped a beat since losing Kelce. And then, of course, on the defense, you lost Fletcher Cox, but you got Jalen Carter, who's playing out of his mind. In my opinion, this team is better than the 2022 team. Now, obviously, you don't have Kelce, you don't have Fletcher Cox, but especially when you look at the secondary, which got picked apart at times in the last Super Bowl against the Chiefs. I mean, it's a better overall unit. It is. And the other thing, too, is we talked about the Eagles' offensive line against the Chiefs' defensive line. Now you look on the other side, the Chiefs' offensive line against the Eagles' defensive line. Because what's the weakness of the Chiefs? It's their offensive line. They got guys playing out of position. Joe Tooney, who's a guard, is playing tackle. Could we see something similar to what we saw in the Super Bowl against the Buccaneers, where, Mahomes is not getting the protection that he needs? Now, I don't think it's going to be like that. I mean, the Buccaneers, they had, Shaq Barrett and JPP and I almost said Mohamed Sanu. Ndamukong Suh. And Levante David, all those guys. I mean, the Eagles have good players on their defense. Their defense is really good, but I mean, that Bucs front seven, I think you'd probably, lean towards, taking that front seven over the Eagles front seven. Now, I'd probably take the Eagles secondary over the Bucs secondary, even though the Bucs secondary was lights out in that Super Bowl as well. But part of that had to be because, they were getting a lot of pressure on Mahomes too. But, I mean, we could see that. But there are stars all over the place in this game. And I'm looking forward to it. I'm in the minority. I think it's going to be a really good game. I'm going to be locked in, but I know a lot of people are like, we've seen this already. Let's see something else. But the Chiefs, they've beaten the Niners twice in the Super Bowl, and now they have an opportunity to beat the Eagles twice in the Super Bowl and to be the first NFL team to ever three-peat in the Super Bowl era, which will be something historic. And a lot of people are not interested in seeing that, and I get it. But if that happens, hey, that's something you've never seen before. Tom Brady never did it, Tom Brady was never able to do it. So we'll see how it goes. But I think whatever matchup we ended up with from these, with the 4 teams that were left, it was going to be a good game regardless. It's just maybe this was the game that not a lot of people wanted to see. But I think it's I'm excited. So we'll have to see how it goes. But that's my thoughts on the game. Let me know what you guys think. What are some of your early impressions for this game? What do you think? Some early predictions here. So that is pretty much it for the show for today. Thank you guys for tuning in. We only got one game left. We got the Super Bowl, and that's it. College is done, and the NFL season will be done soon, shortly after that. So we're just going to have to enjoy. Well, don't forget, the Pro Bowl is next weekend. Yeah, can't wait for that. And then you got the Super Bowl, and then that's it. And then we'll have the off season and draft, and schedule comes out. So, yeah, brace yourselves. The off season is almost upon us, but we do have one more game, and that is the biggest game of the year, the Super Bowl. And also, we could talk about the NFL honors too, because obviously we got to see who wins MVP and things like that. But yeah, appreciate you guys tuning in. And yeah, like I said, the season is almost over. The year just goes. I mean, NFL season just always goes so fast, and this year was just no different. When it comes to these two games, I mean, the Bills-Chiefs game was a classic. Commanders-Eagles just, yeah. I mean, it was close at one point when they kicked off. Now, I mean, when it was 14-12, you thought, okay, maybe this is gonna stay as a game, but it's just the Eagles' running game was just, and the turnovers really, the Commanders just didn't stand a chance. And, Jane Daniels did throw a pick at the end of the game, but, the game was pretty much out of reach at that point. If you were to rank who's at fault for the Commanders' loss, I mean, I think Jane Daniels might be, I mean, obviously you could put him there, but, the Eagles' running game just, the Commanders had no answers. They had no answers for it. And Jane Daniels didn't cause any of the the interception he did, but the ones before that, it was all fumbles, So, we'll see what happens next year, how they bounce back from this, but, yeah. Bills Chiefs, I mean, I expected nothing less. It was as advertised. It's just the Bills once again fell a little bit short, and it's kind of the same thing that we've seen for the last several years. So it's just, like I said, it's Patrick Mahomes and it's everybody else. That's really what it is. That's really what it is. And until somebody knocks him off, that's how it's always going to be. I know Joe Burrow did it, but Joe Burrow did not win the Super Bowl that he played in. So, and then the Chiefs beat him the following year, and then the Chiefs won the Super Bowl. So like I said, it's Patrick Mahomes, it's everybody else. That's how I look at it. But like I said, that is pretty much it for the show for today. Apologize for some technical issues that happened during the broadcast, but hopefully that doesn't happen tomorrow. But hey, that's the internet for you. Make sure to check out all the other shows as well. And until next time, I'm Kenneth Grunfelder signing off from the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Have a good day, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Take care.